Since the Fury is giving me fits right now, we'll move on to the third of my project vehicles, which is this 98 Firebird WS6. It's obviously, well, it's a pretty straight car, and it's had a decent amount of work done to the motor anyways, none of which I did. I bought it the way it sits. It was the old LS1 is gone, and in its place is probably what was an LQ4 truck 6-liter motor. It according to the previous owner, the motor itself would have been Gen 3 LS1, but it has Gen 4 rods and pistons, so it's a little stronger on the bottom end. You can see it's got a set of headers. Allegedly, I haven't looked into the casting numbers or anything. I was told it has LS6 heads and intake. On the dyno, I managed to lay down right around 420 horse and 430 pound-feet of torque at the wheels. So she's pretty close to 500 horse at this point, which makes it a fun drive. But there are, just a couple little things that are bothering me that I'm getting into, and things that need replacing in order to stand up to the eventual build that it will be. I plan on putting a turbo on it, turbo or turbos. I'm not completely decided yet whether it's going to be a big single or twins, but in order to handle that extra power, or the power I'll end up making, I decided to buy a T56 Magnum to replace the stock T56 that was in it. They the factory T56 is rated at about 450, I believe, 450 pound-feet of input torque, and it just, while the T56s are real strong transmissions and they've been regularly pushed way past their rated capacities, I felt that it would be a good idea to throw in a tougher transmission, or one that's built a little bit stronger. Plus the fact that if any of you have ever driven one of these, you know just how high geared they are as far as the overdrive gears. Sixth is actually a 0.50 to 1 overdriven ratio, so until you're doing about 80 miles an hour, you don't even put it in 6th gear. So I bought a transmission that actually has a lower first gear ratio. It's 297 as opposed to the factory's 266, I believe, and the sixth gear ratio is a 0.80 overdrive as opposed to that 0.50, which will make 6th gear a little bit more useful. Not that it'll ever be seen in a race or anything, but it will just make it a little bit nicer for cruising. Those last two, I mean, fourth gear is still 1-to-1, so those last two overdrive ratios will be closer. There will be a little less RPM drop between the two. Conversely, between first and fourth, there's going to be a higher RPM drop in order to make the 297 to 1-to-1 gear ratio over those 4 gears smooth. But I don't think it will impact anything too terribly. It'll make it a little bit easier to launch, because eventually I would like to take this to a drag strip and just see how well it does. Plans aside from the transmission, I have a dual disc clutch that's rated for 1,000 horse. It's another RXT McLeod clutch, the same one or the same style that's in the Fury now. That, and eventually I need to swap out the old 10-bolt rear, and I'm probably going to go with a Strange S60, just a bolt-in rear end with probably about a 330 gear. It may be a little bit high, but I think the turbo will like a little more resistance as opposed to just winging through the RPM. That remains to be seen, but that's the plan. Even with the taller rear gear coupled with the lower first gear that's in the new transmission, I will still have a final drive ratio in first gear anyways that is lower than the existing that I'm dealing with, which will obviously help it get off the line. Speaking of the upgraded transmission and clutch project, this is the new T56 Magnum from, what is it? American Powertrain, I believe, is the company. I got a QuickTime scatter shield bell housing, and then that RXT dual disc clutch. One thing that I messed up on between searching in Summit to see if they actually had a replacement T56, and then actually starting to look for a Magnum, which generally has the higher torque input capacity, I neglected to get a transmission that is a direct swap, and as a result, the tail shaft is actually it's 2.5 inches longer from the face here to the end of the tail shaft, and the shift tower is 3 inches further forward than the stock. Now there's enough room in the transmission tunnel cutout so that this will come through there, but obviously we're going to be 3 inches forward of where the boot likes to be. So I'm going to end up having to fabricate a shifter handle that has a dog leg to kick it back. I think I can get it into the correct location without having to modify my console at all. But yep, T56 Magnum. Let's see, the stock T56, as I mentioned before, has a 450 pound-foot input torque capacity, whereas this one has 700 foot-pound capacity. Apparently it has, I believe, some parts from the TR6060, which is the new 6-speed they put in most of the muscle cars and such. And then along with that extra capacity, this scatter shield will hopefully protect my feet and everything there if that clutch should decide to come apart when I'm at the strip or when I'm beating on it. So I made myself some work by not being careful when ordering this, but it shouldn't be any major hurdle. I will have to get the drive shaft shortened, by what is it, 2.5 inches. But there's a good shop in town that I've had several drive shafts built at, and it's never been any big trouble. So we'll see. Well, we'll detail how that goes. So here's our old T56 that I've already pulled out of the Firebird. It's obviously got the accumulation of 20 years of road grime and oil. It does have a short shift tower, which I won't be able to swap onto the new transmission because the cover plate actually has 6 bolts on that transmission, and obviously we're short 2 on this one. But this transmission will end up in my another project of mine, which is an 82 G-body Regal. I've got the 5.3 that I've been building for it, and then we'll throw this on the back of it and hopefully have some fun with that car. Like I said, everything on this car is pretty much already on there, but when I bought it, it's got a decent looking set of 18-inch rims. I think I, at some point, will probably go with a 19 in order to use a lower profile tire as far as for cruising around anyways, not necessarily a drag strip setup, but a set of 19 so I can put a little lower profile tire on there and still use most of the wheel well there. When it's dropped down to the ground, the wheel doesn't quite go up above the lip there, but eventually I may drop the rear end back down. I've got a set of coilovers on the rear here. The fronts are coilovers as well, but they need new shocks in them. So we'll eventually get to that. But so I had my flywheel all bolted up, my clutch and pressure plate all torqued down and squared away. Then I go to put this piece on, or the bell housing anyways, and realize you can't put this on with the flywheel in the way, so off it all comes. And we'll just hang this here and then go about putting my flywheel on again. I had a little bit of interference with the header there, so I had to make a little bit of room on the plate itself, but it's nothing that's important as far as the protection that this plate offers. So we'll hope this thing will hang there while I'm putting the flywheel back on. I didn't think I'd have a very good angle as far as using my camera glasses here, just because I am up underneath the car. But figure we'll try it and see how well the footage turns out. This is probably the most difficult part, is actually getting these bolts torqued up without somebody else hanging around with a wrench on the balancer up front in order to keep it from rotating. The final torque is 75 foot-pounds, and without a backup, it wants to rotate around before you can actually hit that torque, and I'm going to have trouble here because I was sticking the screwdriver through to one of the, part of the casting so I could brace it. But with this scatter shield piece in the way, I'm going to have trouble keeping this thing from rotating on me. Maybe I can throw it in up there, but we'll see. So anyways,